What's up, awesome peeps? Brett McCluskey here with Electrified Reviews, and today we are going over the Pure Cycles Volta single-speed electric bike. This has been an awesome bike to test. It has been a lot of fun. It's really lightweight, really narrow wheelbase. It's just a really nimble, fun, and maneuverable electric bike. This thing has a 250 watt hub motor. It has integrated front headlights and rear tail lights that actually grow brighter when you hit the brake lever. It also has regenerative braking and motor inhibitors built into the brake levers. One of my favorite features about this bike is that it has a belt drive. It's a single speed, kind of like a fixie, really cool. We'll talk about that later more in depth. It has internal batteries built into the top tube, and it just makes for a very stealthy, under the radar electric bike. Okay, we are going to break down the specs of this bike. We're going to talk about the pros, the cons, and some things I'd like to see done differently in future models. But first things first, let's roll the opener. I've been riding this bike for a while now, and it's been my primary commuter, and it's a really good bike for going shorter distances. It's got this front basket that's integrated into the frame, and it does actually a pretty good job of holding groceries, small items, whatever in there, and it just allows you to kind of go further, go get coffee, go to the grocery store, whatever, just to do fun stuff, have fun with this, and be able to use that front basket along with the bike. Before we dive into the first segment of this review, I want to talk a little bit about this bike, just kind of the overall features of it. So first of all, this bike is a 20-inch frame, and this is the only frame size that this thing comes in. So it's a little compact, a little bit smaller than other electric bikes, but that smaller size does mean that it is really maneuverable. There's also only one color for right now, only in this black, which does look really nice. It's great because Pure Cycles made a point to black out every single point on this bike. The spokes, the nipples on the tires, the rims, the frame, everything is blacked out, and we've got internally routed wires, so it's just a really sleek looking electric bike. But again, for right now, the only color that we have is black. So, okay, first things first, let's talk about the power. Driving this bike to a top pedal assist speed of 20 miles per hour is a 250 watt hub motor here in the back. So normally with hub motors, there's a couple of things that I don't like about them. First of all, it makes the bikes back heavy. Now this is, again, generally speaking, but with this bike, because the batteries are located in the internal part of the top tube right here, it's a pretty well balanced bike, and so that counteracts that balance in the back from the motor. So basically, long story short, this is a well balanced bike even with this hub motor here in the back. Now again, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, this does have regenerative braking, and you have that 250 watts of power to not only get you going, but also to help you stop. So that's cool because it feeds a little bit of power back into the batteries, which is great because this is a 42 volt, 5.8 amp hour battery for a total of about 243 watt hours. So the battery on this is a little bit smaller than average. Now, one of my favorite things about this motor in particular is that it is just so stealthy and ghostly quiet. Seriously, I can barely even hear this thing running when it's in operation. So you couple that with the fact that this thing has a belt drive on it, which again is literally just absolutely quiet. You cannot hear this thing running when you're pedaling it. And then that along with the motor, and it just means that really nobody knows that this is an electric bike unless you want them to know, unless you tell them. But if you're looking for something that flies under the radar, that doesn't scream, hey, this is an electric bike, this is definitely the one. Okay, we talked about the power, now let's talk about the speed. So again, the top speed on this bike is going to be 20 miles per hour with the pedal assist. So this only has pedal assist, not a throttle. Normally, I want electric bikes to have a throttle because it makes me feel like there's more uses, more functions that the bike can fulfill. However, that being said, because this is a single speed and it kind of feels like a fixie culture type of bike to me, I actually really like that there isn't a throttle. So 20 miles per hour top speed, and this has a torque sensor, not a cadence sensor, which is great. Huge upgrade in my opinion, way better than a cadence sensor. And what's great about this torque sensor in particular, it's very, very sensitive and it's very accurate. So as soon as I put any pressure on the cranks of this bike, the torque sensor immediately detects that I am pedaling. It starts giving me power. There's no delay from the time I start pedaling to the time the motor actually starts delivering me power, and there's no delay from the time that I stop pedaling and that the motor shuts off, which is just honestly fantastic because that is a huge problem that I find with bikes that have cadence sensors on them. Now again, like I mentioned, this bike does go to a top speed of 20 miles per hour. Now I'm a 200-pound rider and I'm generally carrying around 20 to 25 pounds of camera gear with me everywhere I go. So around 220 pounds, 225 altogether. So even with that much weight, with this little 250 watt motor, I'm actually able to get close to the top speed pretty easily so long as I am in the top pedal assist mode, the power mode. Honestly, I think that's a pretty cool feat. All right, awesome peeps, we talked about the power, we talked about the speed, now let's talk about the specs. One of the most noteworthy specs about this bike, I think, is that it is a 36-pound frame. So all in all, this bike only weighs 36 pounds, which is awesome because it makes it really easy to carry this thing around up and down stairs. Especially me, I live in an apartment. Being able to carry this thing upstairs and downstairs is really a huge perk. Most electric bikes weigh in at around 50 to 60 pounds, 55 is kind of the average, so this thing being only 36 pounds is definitely a lot lighter than most other electric bikes. Some of the things that help contribute to that is the fact that this is a aluminum alloy frame, aluminum handlebars, we have these smaller 22-inch tires, we've got a less powerful motor than average, around 250 watts, and we've got a smaller than average battery size, 243 watt hours, again up here in the top two. So, you know, there are some trade-offs for that, some pros and cons, but for me, I think the advantage of having a 36-pound bike definitely outweighs the cons. The Volta single speed also has an integrated front headlamp, which really does a pretty good job of illuminating my path when I'm riding in low light or no light conditions. What's cool about this headlight in particular is that it has two LEDs. One for throw and one for spill. So we've got one LED that's concentrated in a tight little ball. It throws light about 30 meters out, and then we have a second LED, which is the spill LED, and that just kind of gives a nice spill light that angles out a little bit wider to help illuminate the path directly in front of me. So really nice setup. Also, this headlamp can be turned on and off from the control center on the bike here, and it also can be turned on from the app, which we'll talk about here in just a second. We've got a tail light as well that is integrated into the battery system. So this tail light, not only does it have a continuous on whenever the lights are on, but whenever you hit the brake levers on this, it actually gets brighter just like a car headlight. Fantastic safety feature, and in my opinion, it looks really cool. The control center on the Volta is pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of information there. Basically, all you have is the pedal assist mode, the speed, and your battery level. Now, this is only a 7-bar battery level indicator, so not going to be very accurate. There's also only a 7-bar speed indicator, so you don't actually have a miles per hour or kilometers per hour. It's a bunch of dots that says how fast you're going, and to me that's just kind of funny because I have no idea how fast I'm going when I ride this bike. Now, the cool thing about this control center is that, number one, it is integrated really cleanly into the stem here. It pretty much just disappears unless you are looking directly down at it. Also, it can be turned on with the included key fob, so you just put it on your keychain, click a button, and the bike comes to life. Or you can use the included app on a smartphone, Android or iOS, attach it to the handlebars or throw it in your pocket, whatever. But it syncs to the bike. You can control what pedal assist level you are in. You can see exactly how much battery you have left. There is a percentage battery indicator on the app. And you can see a little bit of some of the deeper settings in the bike, and you also can see kind of like a workout mode or how far you've gone, how many calories you burned, stuff like that. So the handlebars and the basket are kind of an interesting setup here. They're integrated into the frame itself. They're actually welded onto the stem and onto the frame. So the good news about that is they're not going anywhere. They're not going to rattle loose over time. They're not going to accidentally fall off, whatever. They are stuck on this bike. Now the bad news is that it means that these cannot be swapped out. If I want wider handlebars, if I want shorter handlebars, if I want a bigger basket or no basket at all, that's not really an option here. Also, because this basket is actually located on the stem of the bike, it does turn along with the bike, which means that I can feel the resistance of weight in the basket. It also means that stuff might actually fall out of the basket while I'm riding, as opposed to if the front basket was attached to the frame up here on the top, that would keep it from turning when I turn. And if we jump down here to the tires, we've got 22-inch tires, which is kind of a weird size. So this is 22 inches by 1.5 inches for the front and the rear tires. Normally for compact bikes like this, a lot of folding electric bikes, we have 20-inch tires, not 22. So this is a unusual size, and for me, one of the worries about that is it might be kind of hard to find a replacement inner tube or a replacement tire as time goes on and these wear out. Just something to keep in mind. Also with these tires, the PSI is about 50 to 85. That's not super high, but it is high enough that when they are fully pressurized, they might leak air a little bit faster than an average tire with a lower PSI. So again, just something to keep in mind. Be sure you are checking the tire pressure on this bike as you ride it day in and day out. All right, we have covered the speed, we have covered the power, we have talked about the specs. Now it's time to talk about the pros, the cons, and some things I'd like to see done differently in future models. Pro number one for me has to be that this bike just looks clean. It looks good. I love the aesthetics of this bike. I'm gonna talk about it again. Internally routed cables here, the all blacked out look, the fact that it's a nice compact bike, just really clean control center up here, the handlebars, everything. I love it. Very clean look, looks great. And for pro number two, I'm going with lightweight. Again, at 36 pounds, this bike is ridiculously lightweight and it's super easy to carry around. Not just because it's lightweight though, but because the weight on this is really well distributed. Again, we've got the batteries here on the top tube, the motor in the hub, and it just makes for a pretty well balanced bike, easy to carry around, lightweight, dig it. Pro number three is going to be the lights. I love that this has a front headlamp that is integrated into the battery system. It has two LEDs, one for throw, one for spill. It does a pretty good job of illuminating your path, and I also love that it has a tail light that gets brighter whenever I hit the brake levers. Really dig the light system on this bike. For the next pro, I'm throwing the belt drive up there. I love this thing. It is so quiet, so smooth, and with how smooth the motor is and how accurate the torque sensor is, how quickly it gives power and how quickly it cuts it off, it just makes for an all-around really smooth and comfortable ride. It makes it feel like the bike is working with me instead of for me, and that's kind of the feeling that I get sometimes with other bikes that have a cadence sensor or maybe even a peppier, more powerful motor. And for the last pro, I'm going with regenerative braking. That's just not something that I see a lot on electric bikes, and I really love that this has it on the Volta. Now, obviously, regen braking is not going to be super efficient. I'm not gonna get, 90% of my battery back or 100% of my battery back, whatever, when I'm going down a long hill, but I am going to kind of be trickle charging it, just feeding it a little bit extra juice, and I think that's really important on this bike because it does have a smaller than average capacity battery, and it just kind of gives me a nice warm feeling inside. All right, peeps, we have talked about the pros, but like any bike, there are going to be cons, so let's talk about the cons. For con number one, I'm going with the brakes. So the brakes on this bike are adequate. They do a okay job of stopping. Again, just as a reminder, we have a 140mm disc brake mechanical up here in the front, and we have a caliper brake in the rear. It'd be cool if there was disc brakes in the front and the rear, or maybe if there was hydraulic disc brakes as opposed to mechanical, just because generally speaking with hydraulic disc brakes, you're going to get more stopping power, or if you had at least a mechanical disc brake in the front and the back, there would be more stopping power than just having the caliper in the back. Not a huge deal. Again, stopping power is adequate on this bike, but I gotta be nitpicky, so it's going in the cons. Con number two is going to be the seat post. Kind of a random con, and it's actually almost a pro in a sense, but the seat post clamp here is a tool adjust, and it's a proprietary one that really kind of sinks into the frame and all but disappears. That is great for aesthetics, it's great for looks. However, it does mean that if I want to adjust this seat on the fly, I do have to have tools, and honestly, sometimes that can be kind of a pain. And for the next con, I'm going with the motor. I know I have talked a lot about the motor and how much I like it, and I do like it. However, sometimes it just doesn't feel like it's quite peppy enough, like it's quite zippy enough. At 250 watts, it's not underpowered, but sometimes because this is a single speed, I find myself huffing and puffing more than on electric bikes with a 250 watt hub motor that are actually geared. So obviously that comes with the territory of a single speed, whatever, still going up in the cons. And for the next con, I have to throw the tires up there. Now, there's a couple of reasons that the tires have to go in the cons column. First and foremost, the 22-inch size, it just makes it hard to find replacements for the inner tubes and for the tires themselves as they wear out over time. Also, because these are smaller tires compared to like a 26-inch or 28-inch tire, it's just going to mean that there's going to be a higher angle of attack on this bike. So tackling any bump is going to feel like a bigger bump, again, compared to a bike with larger tires. Last thing about the tires and why they're going into cons is because the narrow tires have a smaller air volume compared to larger tires, and it just makes for a all-around bumpy ride. Remember, this has no suspension, this is a hardtail, and with these little tires, it just makes for a really kind of jarring ride for longer distances. And for the last con, I'm throwing the battery up there. I love that the battery is integrated into the frame. It is well distributed, all the weight, it makes it easy to carry. However, they are not removable. So if I want to charge the battery separate from the bike, that's just not an option. If I want to store the batteries in a cool, dry place, maybe separate from the bike, again, not really an option. And if I have to replace the batteries, it probably means I'm going to have to take it to a dealer or send it back so they can do it, because it's not really something that I can do on my own. All right, awesome peeps, we have covered the pros and cons. Now it's time to talk about the price of this bike and who this is really for. The Volta single speed runs for $19.99, or we may as well just round it up to $2 because hey, what's one more dollar? But at $2, that is going to be definitely more expensive than an entry-level electric bike. But honestly, this is not an entry-level electric bike. This is a bike that has some upgraded features. It's got that integrated wiring, it's got the integrated battery, integrated headlamp, integrated taillight, integrated basket, integrated handlebars, proprietary control center, proprietary seat post clamp. I mean, this bike has a lot of sweet stuff that goes along with it, and that's kind of why it's a little bit more expensive. Now, really, in my mind, this bike is fantastic for shorter distance commutes, or maybe for people who are looking to travel and don't have a lot of space, or maybe somebody who lives in an apartment or in the city and again, just doesn't have a lot of space to store a bike. Because this thing is so compact, because it is lightweight, it's easy to carry around, it's easy to get in and out of tight places, easy to go up and down stairs. Again, I do want to emphasize, I think the Volta single speed is going to excel at shorter distance commutes, and there's a couple of main reasons for that. Again, we've got the smaller tires here, we have the integrated battery, and with these tires, we do have less air volume, so we have less suspension. This is a hardtail, there's no front suspension, so it's kind of a jarring ride, and personally, I've ridden this thing for about 15 miles or so at a stint, and around that mark, it starts to feel uncomfortable. So anyways, that's about it. Still a fantastic bike. Really have enjoyed reviewing this thing, have really loved taking this out for test rides. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys dug this review. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.